Howdy ho, friends. Shalom and welcome to this episode of The Watchdog. I am your host, CJ Cox, here to tell you that we are indeed living in biblical times. I want to remind you that this is found exclusively on the Synagogue News, and we want you guys to think like Neanderthals, because apparently a Neanderthal is just somebody who's got their head on straight in modern society. As you can see, we also got this funny looking Neanderthal character right here. Definitely want to consider thinking like these quote unquote Neanderthals. Be the knuckle dragger. Be the guy who wants to take us back to the 1950s and all that other kind of stuff, right? Everybody says, "Oh, we don't live in that time frame anymore." Blah 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 blah. Well, we should. It was better then. Be the person who says it was better then. It was better when men and women were considered men and women. It was better when till death do us part really meant till death do us part. It was better when killing babies in the womb was considered in the womb. It was better then, and so we want you guys to boldly declare that it was indeed better then. And thank you guys again for watching this program here today. Again, I am your host, CJ Cox. For those of you who are here, please consider liking and sharing this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so. Hit that bell to get notified every time that we go live. We try to go live Tuesdays and Wednesdays, but I'm habitually bad at everything, so we typically take 3-week breaks in between our shows. um, Slightly joking, but unfortunately not really. Anyways, if you guys are here, again, please do remember to like and share the video. Please consider subscribing if you have not done so. Hit the bell to get notified every time we go live. You can actually follow us on various different social media platforms. I am on Gab, Parler, Facebook, Twitter, and Minds. I want to give a special shout out to Gab, Parler, and Minds, as well as send you guys the direction of our Rumble account, which is the backup where we upload videos. The reason for that is because we are currently living in an age of diminishing internet free speech. You cannot trust the government to give that free speech back to you. You certainly cannot trust the companies that are taking that stuff away from you. So who can you trust? Well, the companies that are actually providing you an alternative. So if you're on Facebook, then go ahead and get on Telegram. Go ahead and get on MeWe and take internet free speech back in that way by utilizing the competition. If you're on Twitter, likewise, Minds, Gab, Parler, get on those different sites. You're obviously on YouTube, otherwise you wouldn't be watching this. So get on Rumble, get on what is it, BitChute. Um, I upload automatically to BitChute, so I haven't been on the website actually in a while. But the videos are on BitChute. But nonetheless, um, all that other kind of stuff, right? Make sure you're getting on that. I guess it's kind of funny that I tell you guys to get on this website and then I'm having a tough time remembering what it is, right? But I am primarily using Rumble out of the two of them. That is why BitChute is it's kind of a crap show. I'll be honest. So, but they'll get better. Everybody gets better with the support that they receive from people like you. So definitely consider getting on these different websites. Also, you can actually help us turn this into a career by either giving a one-time donation to the PayPal or subscribing to the Patreon. PayPal is, of course, a one-time donation service. You can give as many times as you like there, or as little times as you like there, as well as much or as little as you like. Patreon is a subscription service. I don't have tiers, so you can give as much or as little as you like there as well. But it will come out once monthly. And of course, anybody who wants to support us, I certainly appreciate you doing so. Obviously, that means that you consider this content to be worthwhile. You consider us to be a beacon of light in an otherwise murky pool of crap that we call the news cycle. So I appreciate you guys doing that. We are back. Guess who's back? Back again. Jay is back for the first time in like 3 weeks. So I appreciate you guys tremendously. We got a lot of stuff to talk about here today. Before we get into anything, first I want to say shalom to some of the people in the live chat. This will be the last time I'm probably acknowledging you guys, only because I don't typically read the live chat. Though if you tag me at the Synagogue News with any questions you might have, we will read any questions at the end of the program. We typically don't have a lot of people. In fact, a lot of times we don't have anybody asking questions. But even when we do have people asking questions, it's not very many. So your question will absolutely be answered. Just make sure you tag me at the Synagogue News when you ask that question. I will not be responding in the middle of the program. Also, I see Kevin's Biblical Discussions and Cryptomeria currently in the live chat. Thank you both for being here, and shalom. Looks like there are 5 people currently watching. So anybody else who is here but has not made themselves known in the live chat, I appreciate you guys being here as well. And shaloms to you. Before we get into the articles that we're going to read today, I want to make my opinions known on a couple of issues. The first is the issue of Herschel Walker running for senator in Georgia. Now, as many of you know, I am a firm conservative, politically speaking. I believe in freedom of speech, the Second Amendment, free market capitalism, staunchly pro life, staunchly pro family. I'm against the LGBT movement, though obviously this is the United States of America. People want to do whatever they want in their own bedroom. I don't really care. But as far as the movement itself, very much against it. Nationalistic, all the kinds of things that associate one with the right wing. With that being said, friends, I am here to tell you, if you're in the state of Georgia, that Herschel Walker is kind of a terrible person. And by kind of a terrible person, I mean he is an utterly, absurdly, almost cartoonishly terrible person. And you do not want him to be your senator. Long ago, I warned everybody that if we were going to jump in bed with Donald Trump and people like him, the Kid Rocks of the world, one Italian dude whose name I always forget, but he was actually working with the organization for like a week before he got fired because he was even too crazy for Trump himself, the Caitlyn Jenners of the world, the Kanye Wests of the world, so on and so forth, that was going to open up the floodgates for a whole bunch of moral deplorables to be the representation of our quote unquote moral side, our moralist side, right? So we are going to be sitting here defending family values, defending marriage, defending things like pro-life politics and stuff like that. And the people who we were going to be electing to defend those things were going to be divorcees and adulterers and wife beaters and all that kind of stuff. I warned about that. And fun fact, friends, it was 1,000% right. Don't mean to brag, but sometimes you need to brag, not in order to brag on yourself, but in order to kind of wake people up. Herschel Walker is a terrible person. Herschel Walker has a great football player, awesome on the field, terrible person. Herschel Walker has paid for one of his mistresses to have an abortion. Herschel Walker has mistresses, so there's also that. Herschel Walker has 4 children with, I think, 3 or 4 different women, only one of which he ever married. The other 3 all being people who he was committing adultery on his wife with, right? He refused to publicly acknowledge them. He refused to take care of them. He refused to give any child support to the mothers. He wants to sit there and talk about how there's too much fatherlessness in the black community, while himself being a father who is neglecting his children and being black. Herschel Walker is a liar who has impersonated an FBI agent, has claimed to be a member of the armed services, even though he is not. Herschel Walker is also a wife beater, has been convicted of beating up his woman. Now, to be fair, the Democratic opponent there, Raphael Warnock, is a lot of these same things as well. But this is one of the reasons why people need to be paying attention in the political cycles. You need to be involved actively in the primaries so that the Republican Party is not being represented by an absolute stooge like Herschel Walker. Because now, really, if you're firmly convicted of the principles that we espouse in conservatism, honestly, you can't vote for Herschel. You can't. You got to vote third party. You got to vote independent. There is no way you can be consistent with your values as a conservative, as a constitutionalist, as a pro-lifer, any of that stuff, and still vote Herschel. You can't do it. Okay. I have said earlier in the year that I supported Herschel Walker for senator of Georgia. I certainly no longer do. That doesn't mean that I want Raphael Warnock to be reelected. He's obviously a terrible person also. But you put yourself in this situation by not participating in the primaries, and now you have an absolute monster representing you, regardless of who that absolute monster happens to be. It might be Herschel, it might be Raphael. It doesn't really matter because they both suck. So, friends, make sure you're participating in the primary elections so that you don't end up in this position in the first place. And now that you are in this position, go ahead and check out libertarian candidates, constitutional party candidates, or Constitution Party candidates, rather. Any conservatives you might want to write in, independents, things of that nature. We don't want somebody like Herschel Walker in the Senate. We also don't want somebody like Raphael Warnock. So I just wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about that. Also wanted to talk a little bit about Kanye West and say a lot of the same thing. Is it tempting to support the big black Hollywood celebrity? I only specify that he's black because, of course, it is The Blexit is a thing, right? Where people are saying, hey, if you have these large swaths of people in the black community leaving the liberal plantation, and I appreciate that. I'm very happy to see them do that. I'm very happy to see themselves liberated mentally and actually supporting policies that will ultimately benefit their communities, our communities, the whole communities of the United States as a whole. I guess I said whole twice. I'm Jay from the redundancy department. Anyways, um, so it's tempting to want the big, possibly billionaire, but at least 100 millionaire celebrity black guy who's a rapper, who's big in Hollywood, all that other kind of stuff. It's tempting to want to support him. The thing is, you shouldn't do it because, likewise, just like Herschel Walker, Kanye West is a terrible person. He's a bad dude, and he's severely mentally ill, by the way. But he's recently been ousted, praising Adolf Hitler, talking about how he wants to go DEFCON 3 on the Jews and how they control everything and they invented cancel culture and the black people are the real Jews and all this other kind of stuff. Um, he's shown up at Pete Davidson's house, which is the former boyfriend of his ex-wife, Kim Kardashian, and tried to intimidate him with violent threats and stuff like that. He's obviously running for president 2024. He's called himself God before, all these other kinds of things. You shouldn't be supporting him just because he wore a White Lives Matter shirt. Okay. There are plenty of other black celebrities who you can support. There are plenty of other black politicians who you can support. If you want to put black faces on the conservative movement because you want everybody to know, hey, this is a diverse movement made up of a whole bunch of different people who only want that which is best for our community at large, meaning the United States of America. You can do that without falling into the pitfalls of Kanye West support or Herschel Walker support, right? Um, there's no reason for consistent Christian conservatives to be supporting people like Kanye West. I'm sorry. Until the man is actually demonstrated that he is a genuinely changed person, until he's demonstrated that he has his mental illness in check, until he's demonstrated that he's not going to fly off the handle with vulgar and obscene and anti Semitic comments like he has recently, we have no business supporting him in the political sphere. That doesn't mean you can't possibly love him. That doesn't mean you can't have a level of hope for him in regards to his Christian conversion, provided that that was legitimate, which I'm not here to say it either was or wasn't. Doesn't mean any of those things. It means simply that we have no business supporting people like Kanye West. And I'm very disappointed to see people just readily accepting him in the conservative movement. Last thing I want to say before we get into our articles, other than this apple cider is bomb, is vote Ammon Bundy 2022. If you're here in the state of Idaho, Ammon Bundy is running as an independent. He is a true constitutionalist conservative. He is a pro-lifer. He is a Second Amendment guy, pro-militia guy, pro-capitalist guy, anti-government in your church guy, anti-mandate guy, we're going to tell you whether or not your business is essential guy. He's fought for liberties before, both in the political sphere and actually in the um, more rebellious sphere, right? And he's somebody who I greatly support and who I think everybody else should also support. Unfortunately, the current incumbent, Brad Little, has refused to debate. So we're not going to see Brad Little exposed for the little shill that he actually is. Although, in a way, his refusal to debate is already some exposure. But I digress on that. Vote Ammon Bundy 2022. And by the way, Scott Cleveland for Senator 2022 as well. I think that'd be an absolutely excellent pick there. Also, Mike Crapo is a dud, frankly. But regardless, we've been kind of rambling here for a moment, and so let's get right into our articles here now. Our first order of business, we are going to talk about how the courts have recently ruled that Alex Jones is to pay Sandy Hook families $1 billion with a B. $1 billion. Technically, it's $965 million, but basically $1 billion. For his quote misinformation campaign in regards to the Sandy Hook shooting. Now, for those of you who don't know, Alex Jones is owner and operator of InfoWars, which is an alternative news outlet. He is also the person who is the main face of the company, being the host of the Alex Jones Show, which of course is named after him. He's of course been banned from, for those who don't know, he's been banned from a lot of social media. He's not allowed on YouTube, not allowed on Facebook, not allowed on Twitter, all this other kind of stuff, right? And he, back in 2012, December 2012, and of course 2013 after, had said that he thought the Sandy Hook shooting was a hoax. He then kind of toned that rhetoric down a little bit and said that it was an inside job or a cover up, but that it did in fact happen, which is obviously different than what he was saying earlier when he was claiming it's a hoax and stuff like that, right? Well, he's been sued numerous times because you have all the stuff that he had said there, and the verdict is in. And according to the Connecticut courts, he is to pay the families of Sandy Hook victims $965 million for claiming that Sandy Hook was a hoax. Now, a lot of people don't like Alex Jones because they think either he's some kind of controlled opposition, which I think is hilarious personally. I don't mean to be rude to you guys, but it's just utterly absurd. Or they think that he's a crackpot, which is, I mean, it's kind of true. It's a little true. He's right about a lot, but he's also crackpot about a lot. There's no doubt about that. Or because they think that he's like a psyop or that he's just an actor or whatever. A lot of people don't like him is the point, right? And as a result, they haven't been supporting Alex Jones in his fight here against this absolutely atrocious censorship of his voice. The problem with that, of course, is whether or not you think he's a good guy or whether or not you think that he is running some sort of a psyop campaign or whatever it happens to be, there still is the matter of a man said some words and is now being forced to pay $1 billion, going to absolute and total financial ruin because he said a bunch of words. Let's take the worst thing he had said, which is that Sandy Hook didn't happen. It was a straight up hoax. Is that worthy of being forced to pay every single penny you've ever earned plus 5 times more? The answer is no. If you think that the answer is not no, you're dumb. You're just dumb. There's no talking to you. You're a stupid person. Frankly, this is an absolutely egregious assault on free speech. There is no reason at all whatsoever that any person, for any reason, should be forced to pay this ridiculously large sum of money for simply saying words, for simply having opinions and then voicing those opinions. Let's say he actually believed that Sandy Hook was a hoax, which I think he did. I don't think he was making it up. If he did actually believe that, then does he not have a right to say it? Of course he does. The First Amendment doesn't protect all your speech about how good the weather is or how much you enjoy Frosted Flakes cereal. No, the First Amendment is supposed to protect controversial speech. Alex Jones saying that Sandy Hook did not happen is precisely the speech that the First Amendment aims to protect. It does not aim to protect me up here saying that that speech should be protected, although that's part of it. Or you in the comment section saying hit that like and support free speech, which I actually greatly appreciate, of course. But the point is, that's not the main goal here. The main goal of the First Amendment as it pertains to the free speech clause is to protect controversial speech which everybody else disagrees with. And it is utterly absurd for us to sit here and suggest that this man should be paying billions of dollars, billion or hundreds of millions, I guess it's just a single billion of dollars, because he said some things that may or may not have been true. Completely absurd. Completely absurd. And of course, now they're using this as precedent. The whole Twitter sphere and everybody in the media is now saying, oh, let's go after Tucker Carlson and sue him. Let's go after Bill O'Reilly and sue him. Let's go after Fox News and sue the whole company there, right? Let's go after Mike Lindell. Let's go after Donald Trump, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to get to you eventually. And by the way, my advice to anybody who is caught in this situation is just to say simply, you're not getting anything. Sorry, no mas. I'm just not going to participate. If you tell me I need to pay it, then I'm going to not. And if you tell me that I'm not going to pay it, then I guess I'll respect your integrity. But if you're telling me I'm going to have to pay it, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to. If you're going to arrest me for that, then I'll burn all my assets. Okay. You want the $1 billion? Well, guess what? I'll light it on fire. And now there isn't $1 billion. Ha ha, he, sucks to be you. You're not getting the money. I'm not going to say the actual word, but F off, basically. Okay. Up against the wall, as Mayor Kahana used to say. Not doing it. Not playing ball. Not playing ball. We're going to go ahead and read a little bit about the article here, or about the event here in an article from Reuters. But that is my honest advice to Alex Jones, to anybody else who finds themselves in this situation. The First Amendment says you don't have to pay it, so don't. And if they're going to play hardball, all right, fine. Sit in jail and burn all the assets. Light them on fire. Either they don't get it or they don't get it. But under no scenario do they get it. Okay? Literally, pound sand. That's all I got to say. Pound sand. So let's go ahead and read a little bit now about this. According to Reuters, Alex Jones must pay Sandy Hook families nearly $1 billion for hoax claims, jury says. Quote unquote jury. I say quote unquote because I don't respect them and I don't respect their position on the jury here as it pertains to this. This is from October 12th. Right-wing conspiracy theorist Alex Jones must pay at least $965 million in damages to numerous families of victims of the 2012 Sandy Hook mass shooting for falsely claiming they were actors who faked the tragedy, a Connecticut jury said on Wednesday. The verdict, which came after 3 weeks of testimony in a state court in Waterbury, Connecticut, far outstripped the $49 million, which he should not have paid a single dime of that either, Jones was ordered to pay in August by a Texas jury in a similar case brought by 2 other Sandy Hook parents. The Connecticut verdict applies to both Jones and his company, Free Speech Systems LLC, the owner of Jones Infowars website. FSS, filed for bankruptcy in July. The plaintiff in the Connecticut case included more than a dozen relatives of 20 children and 6 staff members who were gunned down at Sandy Hook Elementary School in December 2012. Jones claimed for years that the massacre was staged and part of a government plot to take away America's guns. And as I leave the article for a moment, let me say boldly and without stuttering, he has every right to say that. Every right. And you have no right to tell him he does not have a right to say that. In fact, dare I say, at the risk of being sued myself in the future, that the families of the victims here are disgustingly, yes, I said disgustingly, as in they disgust me. They make me want to stick my finger down my own throat and puke. They are disgustingly using the tragic death of their own children as a means to destroy a political opponent and fatten their own pockets. They're vile. They make me want to vomit. And I hope I'm being perfectly clear about that. I absolutely hate the mentality behind what these people are doing. I don't hate them. But I certainly hate what they're doing. I certainly hate that they would use the deaths of 20 children, their own children, to destroy political opponents and to bring a man to financial ruin and to profit themselves in such a way that they end up making millions of dollars. It disgusts me. It absolutely disgusts me. Jones has every single right in the world to claim that this was staged. And where does this end, by the way? Where does this end? If you believe in the Epstein conspiracy, which is a fact, are we going to be sued now because we don't believe Epstein killed himself? By the way, Epstein didn't kill himself. If you guys want to sue me, go right ahead. I'm not paying. What about if we believe the notion that there are concentration camps in the United States, or FEMA camps, as they call them, which is a fact? Are we open for suit then? If you believe 9/11 was an inside job, which I'm not as convinced of that one, but nonetheless, are you now at risk of being sued? What if you believe the lost cause? Are you now at risk of being sued? What if you believe the conspiracy theory that black people are being hunted down by police in the streets? Oh, you don't like that one because that's on your side politically. Still a conspiracy theory. Are you liable to be sued? I don't think you should be, but according to the precedent set right here, you definitely should be. Especially considering your lie caused months of riots in all the different major cities, which led to 30 plus people dying and $2 billion worth of damage. Cough, cough, cough. George Floyd riots. Anyways, back to the article. Jurors said the plaintiffs should also be awarded attorney's fees, which are set to be determined in November, which will end up putting this over $1 billion. During a live broadcast, as the verdict was read, Jones vowed to appeal, as he should, and said his company's ongoing bankruptcy will protect InfoWars in the meantime, which is good. We're fighting Goliath, he said. I completely concur. Jones' lawyer did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Christopher Mattei, a lawyer for the families, said outside the courthouse that the verdict was against Alex Jones, his lies, and their poisonous spread, and a verdict for truth and our common humanity, which, of course, is utter horseshit. Excuse my French, but it certainly is. And Mattei, you're a terrible person, and I hope you stab your tongue with a fork while you eat dinner tonight. Outside the courthouse, Robbie Parker, one of the plaintiffs in the case, thanked the jury for its verdict. Quote, everybody who took the stand told the truth, end quote, Parker said. Quote, except for one, the one who proclaims that's what he does. But while the truth was being said in the courtroom, he was standing right here lying, end quote, which, of course, is not true. Otherwise, he'd be in jail because that would be perjury, and perjury is a crime. But, who cares about the facts? Jones was found liable in a default judgment last year after he failed to comply with court orders. During closing arguments last week, Mattei said Jones cashed in for years on lies about the shooting, which drove traffic to his InfoWars website and boosted sales of its various products. Now, nobody's demonstrated that these are lies, right? Lying, legally speaking, is a very specific thing. It is knowingly saying something that is not true, right? So if I come up here and I say something that's incorrect, but I didn't know that it was incorrect, well, legally speaking, you can't sue me for defamation or for any sort of a lie, right? Because I didn't knowingly spread false information. Nobody has demonstrated that Alex Jones knowingly spread false information. And as a matter of fact, as far as I can gather, Alex Jones did genuinely believe the things that he said about Sandy Hook. And he ended up toning down the rhetoric eventually, right? It went from this is a hoax to this was an inside job, which is, of course, not the same thing. An inside job still happened, right? A false flag attack on Sandy Hook Elementary School still actually occurred, whereas a hoax obviously does not, right? But nonetheless, let's go ahead and continue on with the article here. InfoWars' finances are not public, but according to trial testimony, the site brought in a revenue of $165 million between 2016 and 2018, which is 4 years after Sandy Hook happened, by the way. An economist in the Texas case estimated that Jones is personally worth between $135 million and $270 million. So let's take the high number there. $270 million is what he is said to be worth, right? And it's just simple math. Divide 965 by 270. They would like him to pay 3.5 times more than he's even worth because that somehow makes sense. I don't know how it makes sense. Try and make it make sense. I dare you. It doesn't. It never will. But nonetheless, this is where we're at in the world. FSS's bankruptcy will limit the total money available to Sandy Hook families, as it should. But they could seek other assets from Jones if a judge rules the company deliberately harmed them, which it did not, according to Brian Kabatak, a plaintiff's attorney who was not involved in the case. Quote, the underlying conduct was egregious, and that's the kind of thing that could get you beyond the limits of the bankruptcy, end quote, Kabatak told Reuters. Jones is not personally filed for bankruptcy, but the same principle would apply if he does, Kabatak said. Kabatek, said. The family suffered a decade-long campaign of harassment and death threats by Jones' followers, Mattei said, which is not something that can be pinned on Jones himself. If it was, every single celebrity on the entire planet would be liable for lawsuits. How many different Deshaun Watson fans have sent mean things to Baker Mayfield? How many different Baker Mayfield fans have sent mean things to Deshaun Watson? Those are football players, by the way. How many different Selena Gomez fans sent mean things to Justin Bieber or vice versa? How many different Barack Obama fans sent mean things to Donald Trump or vice versa? Literally every single person in the public eye would be liable for what their fans did if this precedent carried forward, which I think it will. I think this is going to be used as a mechanism to try and silence people because it's a lot easier than killing them, right? Back in the day, the CIA would just whack somebody like Martin Luther King. Oops, did I say that out loud? I'm sorry, sue me. They just whack somebody. But nowadays, it's a lot easier. There's a lot less grief if you just financially destroy them, right? And I think this is going to be the mechanism by which people are silenced from here on out. Every single one of these families was drowning in grief, and Alex Jones put his foot right on top of them, Mattei told jurors. Jones' lawyer countered during closing arguments that the plaintiff has shown scant evidence of quantifiable losses, which is true. The attorney, Norman Pattis, urged jurors to ignore the political undercurrents of the case. This is not a case about politics. It's about how much to compensate the plaintiffs, which is exactly right. At least on the part of, like this is, well, let me kind of rephrase that a little bit because it's not exactly right. It is about politics in so much as they want to silence a political opponent, but it is also kind of a money-making scheme on the part of the families, I think. Oh, did I say that out loud? Go ahead and sue me. I don't give it. I don't care. I'm not paying, right? Douglas E. Merle, a lawyer and defamation expert who was not involved in the case, said the sizable verdict sent a clear message of revulsion from the jury. Quote, his refusal to own up to the mendacity, and lies that he promulgated time and time again over many years has now caught up with him, end quote, Merle said of Jones. The trial was marked by weeks of anguished testimony from the families, who filed the gallery each day and took turns recounting how Jones' lies about Sandy Hook compounded their grief. Notice they're going to sit up here and say, oh, it was anguish for us to get up here and tell the story, even though you're the guys who filed the lawsuit, which means you're the ones who put yourself in this anguished position. But whatever, who cares about the facts? An FBI agent who responded to the shooting was also a plaintiff in the case. Jones, who has since acknowledged that the shooting occurred, he acknowledged it in 2013. I don't know what you mean by that. Also testified and briefly through the trial into chaos as he railed against the liberal critics and refused to apologize to the families, and he shouldn't have. In August, another jury found that Jones and his company must pay $49.3 million to the Sandy Hook parents in a similar case in Austin, Texas, where the headquarters of Jones' InfoWars conspiracy theory website is located. Jones' lawyers have said that hope would be Jones' lawyers have said they hope to void most of the payout in the Texas case before it is approved by a judge, calling it excessive under state law, and it's just excessive in general. Connecticut does not place gaps on damages, though Jones could appeal the verdict on other legal grounds. Matthias said the families would go to any court necessary to enforce the verdict for as long as it takes, because that's what justice requires. And I certainly would appeal this if I was Jones. In fact, I'd take it all the way to the Supreme Court, because it certainly is necessary to do so. But I digress on that. This is an absolutely egregious attack on free speech. Even if it was terrible to say. Look, you guys want to hear something shocking? The First Amendment gives you the right to say terrible things. It really does. It actually genuinely does. For example, if you say that Mein Kampf was a great read and that Hitler was a hero, which is not true, of course. It's absolutely detestable to say such a thing. It's absolutely detestable to believe such a thing. But the First Amendment actually gives you a right to say it. Yeah, I know, mind blower. But that's what free speech is all about. It's the right to say stuff that is stupid, the right to say stuff that may even be evil. You have that right under our Constitution. These people would not like us to have a Constitution. They think the First Amendment is outdated. The Second Amendment is outdated. The Third Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, these rights that we hold dear, right to trial by jury, right to freedom of speech, right to practice our religion as we see fit without compulsion from the government. They think these things are archaic, outdated, the simple results of a bunch of racism and white supremacy and blah, 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 blah. And so they want to get rid of it. And effectively, that is what they're doing to Alex Jones here. They're getting rid of it. He no longer has First Amendment protections because, yeah, he's not going to jail, but he has to give up not only all $270 million of the dollars that he actually has, which would include his assets and stuff like that, not just the actual dollar amounts that he possesses, right? But on top of that, 3.5 times more of that amount. So he effectively has no freedom of speech any longer. It's a bunch of nonsense. It's a bunch of crap. I hate it. I hate what they are doing here. Like I said, I don't hate them. Don't hate them. We shouldn't hate people. But I certainly hate what they're doing. And I, for one, will continue to fight against it, knowing that it could potentially put me at risk for the same lawsuits. But I don't care. I don't care. But at any rate, we move on to our next topic. I feel like I'm getting kind of rambly today, but it's okay. I'm exhausted. It's a little bit as to a little bit of the reason why. The next thing we'll talk about here today, Australia has reversed their decision to recognize West Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Or as I have put it, Australia recognizes Israel's true capital and then doesn't. Now, there's already a problem with the fact that they only wanted to recognize West Jerusalem. As I've pointed out to you guys numerous times before, I believe firmly that what is going to end up happening in the future is East Jerusalem will be established as the capital of Palestine. West Jerusalem will be established as the capital of Israel. And the old city, or ancient Jerusalem, the center there, will be internationalized and probably under the power of some multinational body like the United Nations or some international body that is quote unquote non political, although that's a lie, like the Vatican. And what Australia was going to do here is it was actually only going to recognize West Jerusalem as Israel's capital, which is already problematic. The entire city should be unified. The entire city is indeed the capital of Israel. But on top of the fact that they were already having a problem with the way they were recognizing the capital, they have now created a bigger problem by reversing course and deciding we're actually not going to recognize this as the capital. Israel, unlike literally every single country on the planet, does not have the right to tell us where its capital is. We're going to recognize it as Tel Aviv. And just for the record, I'd like to say, if I was an Israeli politician, I would immediately kick any ambassadors in Tel Aviv out of Tel Aviv. I'd say you're not allowed to be here. You're either going to recognize Jerusalem as our capital, or we're not going to do business with you. And would that do a lot of damage to Israel's economy and to their standing in the international sphere? Of course it would, but it doesn't matter. This is a matter of principle. We get to choose where we put our own capital. We put it in Washington, D.C. Likewise, the Jews get to choose where they put their own capital. They put it in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is their capital. It's been their capital, by the way, forever. Not only since 1948 or since 1896, if you want to go all the way back to before Israel was a nation. It was the capital though of Zionism. But it was also the capital of the Kingdom of Judah thousands of years ago. It was also the capital of the United Monarchy thousands of years ago. I don't know if there was necessarily a capital when they were a confederation of tribes in the Judges period, but nonetheless, I guess Shiloh might actually be the capital at that point in time. It's been their capital for a very, very long time, is the point. And they have every right to acknowledge or to force other people to acknowledge this is their capital. We don't get to choose what their capital is, no more than they get to choose what our capital is. Imagine if China said, yeah, I don't think Washington, D.C. is your capital. I think it's Augusta, Maine. And we said, no, it's not Augusta, Maine. We actually decided that it's Washington, D.C., and we kind of have the right to do that sort of thing because it's our country. It's our capital. And China says, no, it's Augusta, Maine. We're not going to recognize Washington, D.C. as your capital. It's Augusta, Maine. That's the exact same thing that's happening in Israel. The rest of the world is saying, yeah, we know that you say Jerusalem is your capital, but you don't actually have a right to tell us where your capital is. We're going to tell you where your capital is. You don't have any sovereignty over your own nation. But at any rate, that all being aside, Australia reverses call on Israel capital recognition. This article is from BBC News. BBC is a terrible company, so let's just keep that in mind while we're reading this. Australia has reversed a decision made 4 years ago to recognize West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Canberra's decision in 2018 had undermined peace and put Australia out of step with other nations, Foreign Minister Penny Wong said. She stressed that Australia remained a steadfast friend to Israel. No, you're not. Quick pause. Anybody who does not recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel is not a friend to Israel. At best, you're treating Israel like a puppet. You're treating Israel like a dog. You're treating Israel like a slave. And in a very serious way, Israel is the 51st state of the United States of America because we tell them what they can and can't do. And this is something that has been echoed by numerous politicians on both sides of the pond, right? We have guys like Ron Paul here, for example, who've talked about, hey, I mean, we're the ones who fund the Israeli government. We're the ones who fund the Israeli army. We're the ones who fund the Israeli war efforts. We're the ones who have to green light Israeli political action and military action. Are they a sovereign country or not? On the other side of the pond, you have people like Mark Kahana who have said the exact same thing. Why are we asking America for money? Why are we asking America whether or not we can or cannot defend ourselves from Palestine? Why are we asking America where our capital is? A lot of people think guys like Ron Paul are anti-Israel, but Meir Kahane and other Israeli politicians have the exact same sentiment. Why? Because essentially Israel's not a sovereign nation. It's the 51st state of the United States of America. In fact, a little bit worse because it actually doesn't have any say in our politics or anything like that, although certain conspiracy theorists would take issue with me saying that. But anyways, back to the article. She stressed that Australia remained a steadfast friend to Israel. Its embassy will stay in Tel Aviv, which again, I believe that the state of Israel should actually tell everybody whose embassy is in the city of Tel Aviv, hey, fun fact, your embassy's been closed. Sorry, not sorry. Your ambassador can either open an embassy in Jerusalem or he can get the hell out of our country. It's your choice. Anyway, back to the article. The status of Jerusalem is one of the most contested issues between Israel and Palestinians. Another quick pause. There's no such thing as a Palestinian. There are Israeli Arabs. There are Jordanian Arabs. There are Lebanese Arabs. There's no such thing as a Palestinian. There is no such ethnic group as a Palestinian. They're Arabs. There's no such nationality as a Palestinian because Palestine has never at any point in time existed. You can't be a citizen of a country that's not real. You can't be descendant of an ethnic group that doesn't exist. Okay, there's no such thing as a Palestinian. There are Israeli Arabs, namely Arabs who were born in Israel, and there are Arabs from all of the other different countries, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, etc. So if they wanted to say one of the most contested issues between Israel and Arabs, that would make sense. Israel and Jordanians, that would make sense. Israel and Lebanese people, Israel and Muslims, that would all make sense. Israel and the West, that would even make sense because the West is part of this whole contention, right? The status of Jerusalem is one of the most contested issues between Israel and Palestinians. That's gibberish. There's no such thing as a Palestinian. They don't exist. They're not real. Former U.S. President Donald Trump drew international criticism in 2017 when he reversed decades of American foreign policy by recognizing the ancient city as Israel's capital. The U.S. Embassy was relocated from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in May 2018. Fun fact, that was the 70-year anniversary of Israel's existence. Also, not a Trump fan, however, was a big fan of this move. Dead clock is right twice a day, and in the case of Donald Trump, he was actually right far more often than twice a day, right? But nonetheless, as much as I wasn't a fan of the guy, I'll certainly support him in this decision. It was the right decision. Months later, Australia's then Prime Minister Scott Morrison, announced his government would follow suit. At the time, Mr. Morrison said Australia would recognize West Jerusalem immediately, but not move its embassy from Tel Aviv until a peace settlement was achieved. Which, of course, means absolutely nothing. If you recognize Washington, D.C. as the capital of America, but you still have your embassy in Augusta, Maine, then you're just saying stuff. It's kind of like when people get up there and they say, oh, I'm pro-life. And then we put forward a pro-life bill and they vote against it because it's extremism or something like that. It's like, okay, you're voicing words that seem to communicate this idea of being against abortion, but in reality, you're kind of just lying, right? It's the same thing that the Prime Minister was doing here. Also, again, I would like to point out, notice he says he wants to recognize West Jerusalem alone as Israel's capital. Why? Well, because the plan is, mark my words on this, friends, the plan is to divide to divide Jerusalem three ways. They wish to have West Jerusalem as a capital of Israel, a second state established in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, with East Jerusalem as its capital, going by the name Palestine. And then they want to internationalize the old city. And like I said, I believe that will be, the custody of the old city will be given probably to the Vatican, maybe to the United Nations, maybe to a United Nations of Religions, which I have, of course, talked about being a very serious threat in the near future. At the time, Mr. Morrison said Australia would recognize West Jerusalem immediately, but not move its embassy. I just read that. This article was longer when I first read it. Anyways, so they've reversed course, is the point. Australia is not actually going to do this thing. So what exactly is going to come of this? Well, Australia is not a huge player in international politics, but you can kind of actually get a little hint as to what's going to happen if you, number one, listen to what was already said, namely, we'll move our embassy when a peace settlement is reached. And number two, if you look into the Donald Trump, Jared Kushner peace plan that was announced towards the end of his presidency, right? What's probably going to happen here is West Jerusalem is going to be kind of a carrot that is being dangled in front of the Israeli government, right? So this is my own prediction. I can't see the future, so I might be wrong about this, but this is what I think is going to happen. I think that the international community is going to tell Israel, you can have West Jerusalem as your capital. We'll recognize it as your capital. We'll move our embassies to West Jerusalem and establish it firmly as your capital. But we will only do that if you are willing to cede East Jerusalem to the Palestinians, to cede Judea, Samaria, and Gaza to the so called Palestinians, to allow for the establishment of a Palestinian nation, and cede control of the old city where the Dome of the Rock and the Holy Sepulchre and all that other kind of stuff are at, over to some international body, which I believe will end up being the Vatican or a Vatican controlled group. It may even end up being, like I said earlier, the United Nations of Religions, which does not yet exist, but which absolutely will exist at some point very soon. That's what I think is going to happen. And I think what you're seeing here is essentially a step in that direction, right? Australia said, well, we'll recognize West Jerusalem. Then they're reversing course. And why are they reversing course? Well, because they believe that the issue betrays their position as an ally of both sides. Well, what if it is that you have a solution where both sides, quote unquote, get what they want, which of course is not really what's going to be happening, but that's the way it's going to be sold to the public, right? And what is that solution? It's the two-state solution, the partitioning of the city three different ways. And that's what I think is going to end up happening here in the near future. How near? I don't know. I don't know. To be honest with you, I thought that this kind of thing would have taken place before Trump's presidency ended. Now, not only is Trump not the president, but Netanyahu is no longer the prime minister, though he may end up becoming the prime minister again very shortly. There is another election going on in Israel. But nonetheless, this is what I think is going to end up happening. If it does end up happening, then what are we to do with that information? Well, I mean, not much. There's not much we can do other than know it and be in prayer, of course. Um, but I, for one, believe that Jerusalem is the sole property of the Jewish people. I believe that Israel should firmly adopt a one-state solution, namely that there is that the Israeli people, the Jewish people, um, I believe they have full right, full autonomy, full sovereignty over that land, and they should basically treat the land as such. They should say, this is our country, not just what you guys call Israel proper, but the whole thing, all of Jerusalem, the entire Golan Heights, all of Judea and Samaria, which the media deceptively calls the West Bank, all of the Gaza Strip. It all belongs to us. You know, obviously, I think that Israel should have certain, protections for non-Jews, right? I don't think that you should just have to be Jewish in order to live in the country, although that's for them to decide, not for me. I think they should have protections for Karaite Jews and Messianic Jews, whom they currently persecute violently, which I very much disapprove of. But nonetheless, the country belongs to them. I think that it should be recognized that it belongs to them. And I think they should force everybody's hand. They should say, hey, look, sorry, but not sorry. It's our country, kick rocks, or recognize that. It's our capital, kick rocks, or recognize that. So far, nobody's kicking rocks and nobody's recognizing that. Israel, in my opinion, isn't strong enough on these issues. But at any rate, we got one last thing we're going to talk about before we get out of here. So let me go ahead and pull that up here today. Christian canned for not reading gay books sues Christian educator in California who refused to read LGBTQ material, was fired and has now subsequently filed a lawsuit for violation of religious liberties. So we're going to go ahead and read a little bit about that. This is from the Washington Examiner. Fun fact, this guy's name is Luke Gentile, the guy who wrote the article, and I just think that's hilarious. But at any rate, one second. Christian educator files lawsuit after being fired for not reading LGBT books. A Christian child care teacher in California filed a lawsuit last week against her former employer, alleging she had been fired and ill-treated because she refused to read books featuring LGBT themes to young children, which of course is a good thing, I think. Nelly Parasenkova, what a name. Nelly Parasenkova's attorneys filed the suit in the Superior Court of California on Thursday and named Bright Horizons Children's Center and Studio City location director Katie Callis as defendants. Parasenkova said she looked after children aged 5 and under and knew Bright Horizons Children's Center made LGBT-themed books available to be read to the children. However, the former caregiver alleged that she was provided, quote, an informal accommodation, end quote, by a supervisor, wherein she was not required to read the books until Callis discovered Parasenkova's religious objection. Upon Callis's discovery, the director denied Parasenkova's request for religious accommodation and fomented a hostile work environment that eventually led to the educator's firing, according to the lawsuit. After she was called into the director's office, Callis, quote, questioned her in an irate manner, told her that if she did not want to celebrate diversity, this was not the place for her to work, gave her an administrative leave memo, escorted her outside with a security guard, and left her out in the 96-degree heat with no transportation, end quote, according to the complaint. Reading the books would, quote, violate her religious beliefs and constitute promotion of an intimate relationship or of intimate relationships, and choices that are contrary to the teachings of her faith, end quote, the complaint reads. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit. Also get a drink of my apple cider. Quote, Parasenkova formally requested a religious accommodation from Bright Horizons that aligned with her prior informally granted request. Bright Horizons responded by categorically denying the request, end quote, the suit adds. So welcome to 2022, friends, where you can definitely be fired. You can't be fired for violating the religious tenets that somebody puts forward in a strictly religious environment. Like, for example, if Liberty University wants to say we don't want to hire a gay professor because it goes against what we believe here as a university, that's not allowed. But if Stanford University wants to say we don't want a Christian fundamentalist here because what they say, is in conflict with what we believe, that's perfectly fine. But at any rate, it also alleges that Bright Horizons, quote, made no attempt whatsoever to determine whether a reasonable accommodation could be reached. Instead, Bright Horizons issued a counseling memo with false statements, terminated her life insurance benefits, required her to complete retraining, in diversity issues, and encouraged her to resign her position, end quote, it reads. Quote, Ms. Parasenkova could not return to work without an accommodation, so Bright Horizons terminated her employment, end quote. Claims levied against Bright Horizons and Callis include retaliation, failure to prevent discrimination and harassment, wrongful termination, constructive discharge, religious discrimination, and harassment. Quote, they tried to get her to quit through harassment and intimidation. When she couldn't return to work because they denied her accommodation request, they fired her, end quote. Paul Jonah, an attorney representing Parasenkova, said, quote, you can't get much more discriminatory than that. It's unethical and it is blatantly illegal. That's the end of the article here. It's another short article. However, the story's pretty straightforward. This Miss Nelly Parasenkova was fired from her job here at, what was this place called again? Like Bright Horizons Children's Center, right? She was fired from this place because she did not want to read LGBTQ plus themed books to children who are not even yet old enough to understand what sex is. And this, of course, is just part of the ongoing trend perpetrated by the left to try and get our children accommodated to debauched sexual lifestyles as young as they possibly can. Now, I, for one, believe that any organization does have a right to run itself as it sees fit. And that does actually apply here. I believe that if this company, Bright Horizons Children's Center, wants to push LGBT content on the people who are working there, they do have a right to do that. It's their business. They can run it however they see fit, provided they're not breaking the law or violating the Constitution. Of course, the problem is that doesn't go both ways, right? The problem is if Liberty University or New St. Andrews College or Canon Press, or any of these different companies or educational institutions, if they decided we don't want a divorcee or a feminist or a homosexual or a transgender person or something like that teaching in our school or working for us or pushing their beliefs on our kids or anything like that, they would obviously be held legally accountable for that. I think both sides should have the right to do as they see fit, right? It's your company, it's your school. You want to run it a certain way, that's perfectly fine. I certainly know where I'm not taking my kids. Not that I live in California, but nonetheless. But it is the United States of America, and I think you have a right to do that. Um, the problem, of course, here, like I said, is that this sort of a liberty is applied inconsistently. You do have a right to fire somebody for being Christian and not being willing to read an LGBT book to children, but you don't have a right to fire somebody who is reading the LGBT books to children or university students or anything like that because you happen to run a Christian company or even just a company that's run by Christians and doesn't want that as a part of their organization, right? For example, Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is not a Christian company, but it is a company that is run by Christians. It's a company whose culture is greatly influenced by the Christianity of its founders and owners. But they, of course, don't have a right to say, hey, you're not allowed to push that sort of stuff here. Not that anybody would at a Chick-fil-A because it's a restaurant, but you guys get the point, right? The other problem here, of course, is that this is in California, and so the likelihood that this woman is going to get anything close to what she wants is just basically zero, unless she goes to some kind of a higher court, an appeals court, a circuit court, the Supreme Court, something like that. Um, but obviously, as far as like California itself, I mean, it's an incredibly liberal area. It's communist Cali, as I like to call it, or Calistan, as some other people have liked to call it. And there's basically no chance at all that she's going to end up winning this kind of a lawsuit, considering how liberal the state of California actually is. The question, though, of whether or not she should win is kind of a complicated one, right? Because on one end, we don't want these things to be, um, how do I put this? We don't want the inconsistency to be allowed to continue, right? So, in other words, if people are going to be fired for, um, or if people cannot be fired for violating a Christian institution's Christian values, then likewise Christians should not be able to be fired by secular institutions or liberal institutions because they violated their secular or liberal values, right? Um, and so it's basically like we want consistency both ways. Either we do have a right to run our company or institution as we see fit, or we don't, and we all have to abide by these different anti-discrimination laws, right? Um, what should we want? Well, really, what we would really want is for uh, the consistency to be applied, of course, but for it to be applied in such a way that each institution does actually have a right to run itself as it sees fit. That's sort of the definition of what liberty is, right? Um, People don't appreciate that kind of stuff because they're like, okay, well, what if somebody, for example, doesn't like Jews? Should they have a right to say Jewish people aren't allowed to shop here or work here or something like that? And of course, once you start getting into that level of conversation, it's not like that's an illegitimate fear. um as unpopular as it is to say, and being myself Jewish, and I would hate if something like this did happen, I do think they do have that right. um we as a society should want to create a society where people don't choose to do that or don't choose to shop at places that do that. But as far as the government forcing them, saying, hey, you're not allowed to actually discriminate against people, well, I don't necessarily agree with that, to be honest with you. I think that these institutions do have a right to run themselves as they see fit in accordance with their own personal beliefs and values. Um, and I know that's a controversial thing to say today, but that's my honest to God belief. So there's, what are you going to do? Anyways, I'm exhausted. In fact, I'm so exhausted that I'm sure that I sounded kind of stupid at certain points today because I'm just so damn tired. But we're going to get out of here as a result of that, right? So appreciate you guys. If you like this video, please remember to like and share this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so. Hit that bell to get notified every time that we go live. If you have any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, critiques, or anything of that nature, please leave them down in the comment section below. We're going to try and be back next Thursday with another episode, which we'll be talking a lot about Pope Francis and stuff like that. We're also going to have a pretty long episode here at some point talking about the 11th Assembly of the World Council of Churches, as I was not actually actively doing these episodes during it. Anyways, I'm tired. I want to get out of here. Shalom, guys. Think like a Neanderthal, as I often say. And in the face of Armageddon, I would like to ask you, will you compromise?